Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone in the franchise world. My name is Paul Segreto, and this is Franchise Today. Today is Thursday, March 7th, and we're starting our two-part franchise finance series. My guest today will be Ron Feldman, CEO and co-founder of Franchise America Finance. And next week, Sandy Shoemaker, partner at EKF&H, will also be on with respect to franchise finance. I do want to thank Therese Stilgent from Franchise Update Media Group, who was my guest last week on Franchise Today as we ended our five-part Voices in Franchising series. Thanks again, Therese, for being our guest. And thanks for everybody that was our guest in the Voices of Franchising series, including Joe Labava, Nick Howells, of course, CEO and president of the IFA, Steve Caldera, as well as Nancy Weingartner, and, of course, Therese as well. Coming up next week, as I said, we'll be wrapping up this short franchise finance series, and then we'll be turning our focus on multi-unit franchising. We're lining up some guests right now, receiving confirmations. Bob Gappa, who was supposed to be on the show, has some conflict with travel, so he won't be on. But we definitely have a couple of guests, and that'll coincide with the Franchise Update Multi-Unit Franchising Conference in Las Vegas. And then April and May is always an exciting time for Franchise Today as we're into our fourth annual Franchise Legal Series. And some of the guests on the series, it'll be 9 parts, and we've been promoting it as 8 parts, which, of course, is up from 7 segments last year. This year will be 9 segments. Some of the guests that have already confirmed, and we're ironing out topics right now, are Lane Fisher, Lee Play, Warren Lewis, Jonathan Redgrave, Amy Chang, Mark Kirsch. And we're just putting together one heck of a 4th annual Franchise Legal Series. Should be very exciting. Then in May, that's in April and May, and then in June, we'll be having 2 various series about technology in franchising, and then we'll be doing 2 segments on franchise sales and development. And then this summer, where we typically have been on hiatus in the past, this year we'll be doing 8 or 9 live segments throughout the summer. It'll be our Franchisor Spotlight Series. We've already received some commitments, including Dina Dwyer-Owens on Thursday, July 11th. So really should be an exciting time. If you're at some of the upcoming events in franchising, I will be there as well. That should be the Franchise Update Multi-Unit Franchising Conference. That'll be in a couple of weeks in Las Vegas. Then the Franchise Finance and Growth Series also in Vegas in April. And then in May, we have the new IFA Technology Conference, also Fran Jam, which will be in Atlanta. We'll have more details on that. I'm really excited about that. This will be the first ever. And then, of course, the IFA Legal Symposium, also in Washington, D.C., and maybe certainly there won't be snow just like there isn't right now, as Ron and I were talking about before the show. He hasn't even seen a snowflake in Philadelphia through what was supposed to be a major snowstorm. Then also Franchise Update's got the Franchise Consumer Marketing Conference also in Washington, D.C. That's in Atlanta this year. Last year was in San Francisco. And then, of course, in New York in June is the International Franchise Expo. So really a lot of events coming up in franchising. Of course, in the meantime, make sure to support your local Franchise Business Network group and Women's Franchise Networks as well. It's really important to do things at the local level. Well, returning as my guest, again, I believe this is the 3rd time on Franchise Today, is Ronald Feldman, CEO and co-founder of Franchise America Finance, which is a boutique franchise investment and lending source. He's been a keynote speaker at scores of franchise-related events. I think we might be able to say hundreds, actually. He's appeared on televised programs as the champion of small business. He's been published numerous times in trade magazines. He's an instructor on financing and access capital to the International Franchise Association, where he is extremely active. I can't even begin to say how active Ron is, and certainly a presence at IFA functions. He has the distinction of being a certified franchise executive. Ron, welcome back to Franchise Today.
Thank you very much, Paul, and congratulations on joining the CFE Club yourself.
Oh, thank you. It was a long time coming, and I appreciate the congratulations on that. And I'll take a moment to emphasize to anybody, if you've yet to sign up and proceed in getting your CFE, do so. You know, if you think that you know it all, trust me, you will learn so much more in going through the program, and of course, being part of the club, as you said, Ron, to me in a message on Facebook. Welcome to the club, and it is a elite club, and I appreciate your comments there, and I certainly look forward to being as active as a CFE member as I possibly can. Also, you know, to that, it's the first year that I've really contributed at the maximum level at FranPac. You've done a wonderful job at FranPac. If you would, before we get into franchise finance, please explain to a lot of our listeners who really don't truly understand FranPac why it's so important that they get involved in it.
Sure, Paul. FranPac is the Franchise Political Action Committee, and it is an organization that gets access to small business-friendly politicians and provides capital to their campaigns to help get them elected so that small business can have a voice on Capitol Hill. FranPac is actually last year, in the last cycle, became $1 million PAC, which puts it at the top, at the elite level of PACs, of trade associations, playing way over their fighting weight, and has done an amazing job with the SBA in helping to get capital access back, in working with small business-friendly legislators on issues like Obamacare, the 1099 rule. There's a bunch of wins that we could talk about that happened on Capitol Hill as a result of franchising having a voice, and FranPac is the vehicle that gets that voice for the industry. And there's many levels to donate. You can go on franchise.org and click on the link, and you'll find out how to get involved. Everyone in franchising who earns a living from franchising should be involved in FranPac.
Right, and that's at franchise.org. You'll be able to find the information on FranPac. And then also, Ron, obviously the big trek onto Capitol Hill occurs in September at the IFA Public Affairs Conference. If you kind of give a little bit of insight into that, as I know it all ties together.
Well, that's the annual fly-in where we all converge on Capitol Hill and we actually get appointments with congressmen and senators and their staff members, and we make our case for why franchising is a job creation engine, which it is, on why unnecessary regulation and the employer mandate are very tough on franchise businesses. The IFA has amazing data. They actually have franchise jobs down to the congressional district level. So if you're going to see your congressperson, you can show them how many businesses and how many jobs in their district are related directly and indirectly to franchising. It's also a great opportunity for franchisors who are listening to maybe have their franchise advisory council meetings in D.C. at the same time so that their franchisees can go up on the Hill. And for the last, I don't know how many years, they've actually had the Franchisee of the Year awards at this event. So it's a great event for the whole industry.
It really is. And in September, around the Public Affairs Conference, Franchise Today will be, our shows will all focus on public affairs activities and what have you. So that should be an exciting month. And I do want to, before we move further and get right into the meat of today's show, I do want to thank our strategic partner, Fishman Public Relations and Marketing. Without them, we could not get the reach on Franchise Today as we have right now. So really appreciate Brad and Sherry Fishman a lot, and Deborah Vilchis and the entire team at Fishman Public Relations. You know, a couple of weeks ago, as I said earlier, Steve Caldera, the CEO and president of the IFA, was my guest again on Franchise Today. I was really honored that just a couple of days before the franchise convention in Vegas, he was able to take some time and spent an hour with us on the show. And right about that time, the IFA had released their 2013 policy platform to accelerate job creation in franchising. And one specific part of that was about small business lending, and I'll read. Franchising thrives when capital flows freely from commercial and government-guaranteed lenders to qualified franchise borrowers. For every $1 million in lending to a franchise, 40 new direct and indirect jobs are created, generating $4.2 million in economic output. The IFA supports maintaining current funding levels for the 7A and 504 loan programs, given franchises are responsible for 7% of total SBA loan dollars and 11% of total SBA loan volume. And I know Ron, obviously, as CEO of Franchise America Finance, you are certainly entrenched in franchise finance. So why don't we just start off asking you the crystal ball $1 million question. Where are we going? Where are we going with franchise finance, in your opinion?
I think there's two clear and very separate paths that we're going in franchise finance, and it all relates to size. Size really does matter in franchising, and where it is, where we see the market and going, and where it is right now is great borrowers, great operators who have excellent unit level economics, who show their profit on their tax returns, who have a visible history that a bank underwriter can look at, are having no access to capital issues. In fact, it's getting too loose. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's getting a little too loose. And in that instance, and especially at the very, very high level, the 10 million and up level, which is not the, if you look at number of stores, it might be a material number, but if you look at number of franchisees, it's not. When you get down into the lower levels, between 1 and 10 million, it's very competitive still, again, for qualified existing operators looking to grow. Where the flip side of that is the corporate refugee who's looking to buy a franchise or get involved with a franchise who has no direct experience and no history that can show that they have an ability to repay is really still behind the eight ball and having a real difficult time getting that first unit done.
There's so much going on today around economics, and I know the different. There's so much news out there that's causing so much uncertainty. I know I read one this morning, I believe, out of the LA Times, and it says, despite Dow's record close yesterday, small businesses still struggle. And he said, of course, along with a sharp drop rate in new startups, a big reason has been employment growth has remained mediocre. How important are, like the other day, I know Shelley's son, one of our favorites on Franchise Today, was up on Capitol Hill and was talking about the employer mandate. I mean, how does this all affect the realm? And I think we really need to take this down to a simple level, because there's a lot of our listeners on Franchise Today understand what's going on in very general terms. How is this really affecting franchise? Because a lot of times people hear about stuff on Capitol Hill, they say, that's not going to affect me now. That's going to affect me 3 or 4 years from now. What is the reality of the here and now?
The reality is that you're being measured today for next year when you have the mandate coming to you. Your history today matters next year. So your actions right now have consequences. And there's a bunch of manager rounds now, and there's a lot of consultants out there that are creating a new industry. It's funny, it is creating jobs. It's creating jobs for those folks that are figuring out how to manage around Obamacare. But it is something that is a game changer, especially in franchising in the hospitality and in the food side, where you have multi-unit operators with more than 50 full-time equivalents. It's got some really serious effects David Barr, from the board member of the IFA, has done a very amazing job at communicating what it means to his operation and how it affects him. And in fact, next week there's one more franchise conference that I have to throw in. The Unconference
that's right.
is next week in Park City, and that is one of the main topics of discussion for all the CEOs that are going to be there. How do we do this? And the unintended consequence is going to be there's going to be a whole lot of 28-hour employees out there, so that business owners can manage around the employer mandate. The other thing that maybe you asked me about my crystal ball, the other thing that might happen, which it would be very surprising or it might be actually refreshing, is that you might have a return to the owner-operated model in some franchise brands, where you have less than 50 employees and you're not subject to that mandate.
That is an interesting proposition. I'm glad you mentioned that because, looking at the IFA release on this, and they were saying, let's see here, it said, Shelley had said defining a large employer as one with at least 50 employees instead of full-time equivalents would provide small business owners with more certainty about their status. And then also there was another one that came out yesterday that talked about just what you said, more of the owner-operator popping back into it. There's, as I do for each of the shows going into it, I do a lot of research online as far as news and different things, whether it be bloggers, whether it be publications, national publications, etc. And it's just unbelievable. There's so much information coming out every day about small business finance. We see a lot of pros, and you obviously see a lot of activity, proactivity from the IFA. Even in some publications, yesterday I picked up one that was a Hispanic publication, and it was Financing for Small Businesses, Fuel for Economy, and it was by the IFA Steve Caldera and Todd McCracken and Beth Solomon, who used to be with the IFA. It's tried and true. We know small business is the engine of our economy. There's no doubt. And you mentioned a little bit tongue-in-cheek, probably coughed on it a bit when you said it's getting too loose again. Explain a little bit about that. I mean, is that really what's happening in your mind? Well,
let me just go back. There's one other thing on Obamacare that I scratch my head sometimes when we look at projections from franchisees that are borrowing money today that have 50 employees and they don't account for the mandate. We scratch our heads. Are you
right.
really? You've got to increase your employee benefits line by X. What amazes me is some banks aren't doing that. So they've got their head in the sand because, again, uncertainty. They don't know what the cost is going to be, so they choose not to put anything in. We're actually working with somebody to introduce into the franchise space franchisor health care for all of the franchisees and their employees, which, keep your eyes and ears open for that because it's something that allows franchisees to be buying as a large national group instead of a small group of 10 or 20 people. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. In terms of getting too loose, there's a lot of competition right now for great deals. And I see by too loose, I mean it's good for the borrower because banks are competing at a very high level and borrowers are getting terms that are very favorable if you are a high-level performer in a great brand. I mean, we talked last year with the whole movement, the 99% and the 1%. The 1%, I would say even the 10% that are the top 10 percentile in franchising are doing really well. Top 20% are doing very well, and then the top half are really not having issues relative to capital access unless there are some other factors or they're not presenting their financial statements properly.
With all the negative out there about tight lending and credit access, your company, Franchise America Finance, continues to provide financing or puts together financing for various organizations. And looking at your website, we saw last year with Massage Envy, East Coast Wings. I think there was just something I saw in the franchise handbook with Papa Murphy's. Is that correct?
Yes, we just started a program with Papa Murphy's. They're our newest brand. That program is a brand specific program lending opportunity for franchise companies that have great unit level economics to get predictable access to money, using that word, certain access to money, should their prospects and their existing franchisees meet metrics that we come up with collaboratively with the franchisor. So we've got in the low 20s in brands in the program. We are doing very well in terms of helping those franchise companies add new franchisees and especially having existing franchisees add more units. It is a program that we're looking to expand. We'd like to have 5 to 10 more brands in it, and we're out there looking. The IFA convention, we had a bunch of great meetings, and we're hoping that we have some more brands to add to it.
So for the listeners that are not quite aware of how the program works, can you kind of give us an overview? If I'm a franchisor, I've got a couple of hundred units, I've got some decent unit economics. I call you and I say, okay, what do I do? What are the quick steps that I can expect to go through?
Sure. The qualification, really, the first qualification is you have to be royalty self-sufficient. The easy way to calculate that is you subtract the franchise sales line from your franchisor's financial statement, and then you subtract all the costs. If you still don't have a profit, you're not going to get in.
Okay.
So that's kind of the litmus test. We've actually loosened it a little. It used to be that they wanted to see the 50th unit open 5 years ago, but we've with brands like East Coast Wings, which has done just a phenomenal job, we are looking for some more emerging brands to put into the portfolio. If you have unit economics and you know them, because I can't tell you, Paul, it makes me nauseous when I see franchisors that don't know down to the EBITDA level of what their franchisees are doing. Franchisees need to make money for franchising to work. And so if you know your unit level economics and you're going to grow and you need a minimum of $5 million of access for your franchisees, give me a call and we'll see if we can't help you.
Well, that's great information, and I'm hoping that you do get some calls from this because I do believe it's a good program, and thanks for explaining it at a simple level. I know there's a lot more to it than just a simple statement about it. Last year, might have been 2 years ago, Daryl Johnson from Frandana was on Franchise Today, and he said something that really resonated loud and clear with me even to this day. And he said, what really is going on, and of course at that time we kind of was still experiencing some of the downtown, and hopefully we're on our way up. And he said, it really came down to, common sense. And, and obviously common sense is a very broad term. And when I hear about, loosening up because there's a lot of deals out there, obviously it concerns me because hopefully we don't wind up back where we were. And when we look at common sense, it seems to me and obviously most of us in franchising that, the common sense would be the franchisees have to make money. It has to be about unit economics, and that's a term we've been throwing around a lot over the last 2 years. In your estimation and from what you've seen, Ron, are more and more franchises really concentrating on unit economics?
The great ones are. Even the good ones are. If you look at Item 19 disclosures, just in the last few years, 5 years ago, if you looked, there were, I don't know, 20% even had item 19s, and if you looked at the item 19s that were there, 80% of them were just gross sales. Now you look at some of these item 19 disclosures, and some of the average, I'll use East Coast Wings again. I mean, they're out there spouting EBITDA percentages in their print ads. Aaron Rents is another one that did that, very well. Jimmy John. I mean, first of all, you're letting prospective franchisees know that magical question that gets asked in every franchise sales presentation: how much can I make? Right?
Right.
And it eliminates the back of the napkin discussion that everyone fears. So from a franchise development standpoint, great item 19. And again, if you don't have the numbers, or your franchisees aren't performing, it doesn't help you. It only helps you if the numbers bear out. Darrell's words were "performance matters." Those are the two words that still resonate with me, and resonate with all the brands that we deal with. So the other thing it does is it gives a banker, an underwriter, a frame of reference when they look at a projection for a new unit. They can go back to that item 19, or even better, a bank credit report that that communicates it in a more detailed way. It lets that underwriter make an educated guess, because that's all it is, on what the projection is, with some framework. And that's the difference between franchise lending and non-franchise lending, is we have all of this performance history out there in like brands and like geographies. I don't know how many franchisors out there know that they can make a supplemental item 19 disclosure based on geography. That helps bankers. It also helps prospective franchisees. So there's a lot of ways and a lot of tools out there to communicate that information. But again, if your franchisees aren't making money, it doesn't really matter. And then maybe you should look at your business model, and maybe you shouldn't be growing.
Right, and definitely focus on the unit economics. But And next week on Franchise Day, we have Sandy Shoemaker, who's a partner at EKS&H, and I know you know Sandy as well, Ron, and we're going to be talking about, getting that financial house in order. The name of the show is Franchise Finance, from unit economics to FDDs and FDRs, and we're going to be talking about it more from the accounting standpoint. But what do you say to the young startup franchisor with a handful of units that obviously doesn't have a lot of data and probably not great data yet at this point for their item 19? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, hopefully you have some corporate units that you ran before you started franchising, and you have the P&Ls and the performance history of those corporate units. You shouldn't really expect your franchisees to be able to walk into a bank and get a loan based on your performance history of 2 units for 8 months. Right. I see that all the time with startup franchise companies. If you're going to sell a franchise to one of if you're going to sell a franchise to somebody at that point, and I'm not going to debate, whether you should be doing that or you shouldn't, they've really got to have the cash. Right. You can't expect any debt to happen. But documenting the unit level economics from day one is really, really important. I was a franchisee years ago in the Goddard School system, and that's one of the things that they did right. This is 1995. Mm-hmm. They were requiring full P&Ls monthly from every franchisee, and were benchmarking franchisees against other franchisees. That's 1990. That's almost 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many franchise companies still don't do that today.
Right.
So getting that information, and more importantly, communicating that information to lenders in such a way that you're not violating the FTC rule, and one of the best ways to do that, obviously, is through a bank credit report.
Sure.
So, go ahead.
As I've said on the show, over the years, I've done kind of an informal survey, and I think the last number is up to 1,077 probably at this point. I should formalize it. But it's been over the last 15 years talking to franchisees that are no longer in their systems. Thus, a lot of them can be considered to have failed. Those are the ones that I'm basically been talking with. And when I talk with franchisors, and I ask them, what's the reason for franchise failure? And I hear two common things. Number one, they were undercapitalized, which of course I typically say, shame on you for allowing them into the system. That's number one. Or as I like to refer to as the Bangor, Maine syndrome, which is you're developing throughout the country, in certain parts of the country, and somebody from Bangor, Maine, nothing against Bangor, Maine, but waves a check and says, I'm ready to buy. And of course, franchisor jumps and says, there's $35,000 to the coffers. And then the other half said that, franchisees, the ones that failed, weren't following a system. They were the renegade franchisee. And when I surveyed these 1,077 informally, as I said, 89% fell in two categories, almost split evenly. And one part of it was not really having the basic understanding of Business 101. And, of course, what I'm leading to here is, even understanding their own financials. And when I talk with franchisors and I say, how can you expand your training program to give them some of this basic information that's outside of your quote-unquote system, which, you train them quite well in. But what about some of these basics? And getting down to the question of how important is it for we know how important it is for the franchisee to understand their financials, but do you believe that franchisors should spend a little bit more time making sure franchisees understand how to read financials?
I think if you're not doing that, you're doing a disservice to you and to your franchisees. I think if you don't have a common chart of accounts that all of your franchisees are required to follow, so that you can actually benchmark how they're performing with some certainty as to how different things are getting charged. Steve Lefevre does an amazing job at Profit Mastery of doing that on an outsourced basis if you're not going to do it internally. And it's I can't tell you how important it is. Basic business knowledge is not something that someone who worked in corporate America got. And one of the SBA rules, or guidelines used to be, P&L responsibility. That's something that they wanted to see in somebody before they'd allow somebody to get a loan. And that's really important. Somebody who was a middle manager in a company that didn't really have a budget and didn't have budgetary responsibility might not understand how to read a profit and loss statement, or more importantly, a balance sheet.
Which leads me to the next question or statement. It's equally, if not more important, that the operations people working with these franchisees understand financials and P&L statements and what have you, because I think that's where a problem lies in franchising today with a lot of these operations people that are dealing face-to-face, one-on-one with these franchisees and really don't know what they are looking at.
Absolutely. And again, one of the best tools you have out there are dashboards and benchmarks. The data's there. Franchising has such a leg up on the rest of the world because the data's there. It's consistent. It's all within a brand. You can break the brand down to territories. You can break the territories down to sub-territories. And you can really see how you're doing against the people within your market, the people within your region, and the people nationally. And, being transparent about it is something that I think is important in a franchise culture because, Tony Martino, who's the guy who taught me most of what I learned about franchising, said franchising's easy. Just make sure your franchisees make money. And
it is relatively easy, and that's really basic common sense, you would think.
One would think, but the culture for a long time was build sales regardless of what the profits were because you got more royalty, and that's not really, that's not a good way to look at things.
You're right, and that was the culture because I remember about 8 years ago, and I won't mention names. I don't think it's fair to because I believe things have changed in this organization, but I was recruited by a headhunter to run a national brand again, and I was intrigued by the brand, and even though some of those offers continue to come in, at that point I did go through the interview process, and I was with the CEO of the company, and this was a brand that had a couple of hundred units, non-food service. And I was asked by the CEO, so if we put you in this position, or better yet, if you went into one of the other brands that you had run in the past, what would you do differently? And I said to him, I would drive, my primary focus would be to drive business to their locations. And he stopped, and he kind of looked out the window, and he said, well, then I think this interview is over. This is exactly what happened, Ron. And I said, why? He said, because your primary goal should be to drive franchise growth. And I said, if the franchisees aren't making money, then we need to evaluate the system, improve the system, number one, so that the franchisees are making money, because without franchisees making money, you're not going to have any type of validation. You're not going to have a system. Why bring in more people? And we actually had a pretty heated discussion about it, and he just was adamant at that point. If your number one goal isn't driving franchise sales, then you're not the individual for us.
Well, good thing you didn't take that job.
Oh,
one of the other things that I learned a couple of years ago, I heard Tony Joyous speak. I don't know if you know who Tony is. From Togo's. He's the CEO of Togo's, and he used to be the president of Baskin-Robbins. And when he spoke, it was actually at the Fagerty and Benson Summit. He said that his management team, a big part of their annual bonus is based on franchisee profitability. That's his management team.
Nice.
And when I heard that culture, I said, I want that brand in our portfolio, and you know what? They're in our portfolio.
That's awesome.
So I thought, what a great culture that is. Going back though to you were talking about transfers. I wanted to just add one thing. My wife and I were Goddard franchisees for 10 years, almost 10 years, and we got very few calls while we were franchisees. The year that we left and we were in as an ex-franchisee, we got like 15 phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you leave? Was it a good experience? And we were able to fortunately answer those questions very positively. We had we had an amazing experience in that system. But that's when people are calling. They're calling to find out when they're deciding whether they're going to move forward or not. They're calling the ex-franchisees. They're not calling your existing franchisees.
Right. Yeah. Why did you leave? And how was the experience? And it is all about the experience. And Lonnie Helgerson and I were talking in Vegas, and I said, everybody's talking about customer experience. And I'm a big proponent of starting to talk about franchisee experience and taking that even a step further and talking about employee experience. I mean, we've got employee review sites popping up as fast as customer review sites are popping up lately. And I think, franchisors really need to look long and hard at their franchisee experience, all the way from communications to transparency to financials, all the way down the road. And that was the other 50% of these quote-unquote failed franchisees, that there were personal issues. And there weren't personal issues. I mean, there were personal issues from the respect of either they grew too fast, made too much money, and put the white powder up their nose, to bringing Junior on too early and being inexperienced, to not having the spousal emotional support at home, to a host of different things, drinking problems, drug problems, et cetera, et cetera. And what really annoyed me about a lot of franchisors that I talked about and said, you really need to get an understanding of what's going on in the franchisee's life. And I was told, well, we're not chaplains, we're not family counselors. And I said, yeah, I know, but then don't say that when you're in a franchise you're part of a family, because if you treat family members like that, I certainly wouldn't want to be a family member there. But taking it a step further, I said, when the franchisee, because I've been around enough franchise systems to see how this works, and I've had operations people under me and I've seen how they react until they're trained. When they no longer owe you any money, they have no outstanding financial obligations to the franchisor, the typical operations call is, hey, Ron, how's it going? I understand, Becca's going to school. How are things going there? How are things with your wife? I heard you're going on vacation. So the pictures on Facebook, et cetera. Okay, bye. I said, so when there's no financial obligations left or nothing that's outstanding, the conversation does go towards family. And I said, you don't really need to be a chaplain or a advisor, but if you see a trend all of a sudden going down and you have copious notes and you say, okay, he brought Junior on as a manager on this date, let's look at it. Get down to that type of nitty-gritty, because often than not, we see those trends starting to occur. The key is to be on the front end of those trends.
Absolutely. You want to be proactive, not reactive.
Oh, God, yeah. Definitely. We're on Franchise Today. My guest is Ron Feldman, the CEO and co-founder of Franchise America Finance, and we're in the last half hour of today's show. It's our first in the Franchise Finance series. Ron, lots been going on at Franchise America Finance. I mean, we talk to franchisors all the time when we talk about evolving their business, and it seems like Siegel Capital, our financial group, has really evolved over the years, trying to keep up as best you can with the changing economic environment. Can you kind of give us a little bit of thought behind the evolution from where it was, 5 years ago to where it is today and where it's going?
I'll go back a little further than 5.
Okay.
Siegel Capital was born in 2002 and grew at an amazing pace. Nate Greenberg and I got involved with Bernie Siegel, who was the founder of the company and who's actually 2 doors down from me right now. He still comes to work.
Yep.
And in 2005, we decided that Bernie was looking for a retirement strategy, and in 2005, the three of us sat down and decided that we were going to buy the company in 3 years. Well, if you look back 3 years after 2005, it was 2008, so it really wasn't a great decision to buy the company in the beginning of 2008, right before the meltdown, but we did, and we went through the meltdown. We had to basically start over, Control-Alt-Delete on the business, and we formed the FAF portfolio, we formed the FAF program, and now we have, throughout the years, done other services for franchisors and franchisees, like valuations. We do between 900 and 1,000 valuations a year of franchise businesses. We do brokerage of loans for brands that are not in the FAF portfolio or for transactions, a lot of transfer transactions, franchisee to franchisee or franchisee to non-franchisee. And we've been able to, this year we're making a big focus on relaunching that for brands that have great unit economics but might not qualify to be in the FAF program. And we're actively looking for folks to help. Again, if you can't make a case that your franchisees make money, we can't help you, because the last thing we want to do is try and sell a loan to a bank that doesn't get repaid.
Sure.
So that's kind of where it is. Going back to that whole culture discussion that we just had a minute ago.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
At the IFA, I saw a brand that is doing everything right, and they happen to be one of ours, so I'm going to boast. But Jersey Mike's, and you had a posting today. You had a posting today on they're coming to Houston, and I'm still waiting for them to come to Philly if they're listening. But they had 100 people there to salute Peter Cancro, the founder of that company.
Yep.
Franchisees and suppliers got involved. I mean, what a great! They truly have embraced that family culture. Their giving, their community giving, is what drives their sales, and that's certainly a brand that others can look to for a good example of how to manage your corporate culture.
Absolutely. What a tremendous story. What a tremendous history. And what a tremendous growth surge you're going through. I know a lot of the guys at Jersey Mike's, definitely out of the realm of clients and brands that I typically deal with, from a business standpoint, formerly with Franchise Essentials before the merger with Franchise Foundry. I mean, definitely not on our radar, or better yet, we're not on their radar. But have stayed in touch with them and talked with them a lot. Brian Summers, VP of Franchise Development, and I maintain a close relationship and contact and talk quite a bit, and invited me to sit in on their franchise development seminar tonight in Houston, and I'm honored to do so. I got to meet Peter at the IFA. We had a great conversation. I mean, I'm from New York, he's from New Jersey, and he's going to be a guest on Franchise Today, but he had one stipulation, Ron, and that was that we had to sit across a desk from each other as we were on the show, Jersey boy to New York boy, and he said, and we're going to hash it out. And I believe Peter when he says, we're going to hash it out. Great guy, great story. I mean, just a fantastic organization. It really is. And thank you for bringing it up. That's not boasting. I think that's just more than anything, just putting the people in the spotlight that need to be in the spotlight. And there's a lot of other great, franchise organizations, obviously, that are out there that are building a great culture. I mean, I don't think we could talk about culture and franchising without talking about Dina Dwyer Owens, without talking about, Steve Greenbaum and a host of others. But as we're talking about culture, and you mentioned Bernie, I had the very, very distinct honor and pleasure of spending an enormous amount of time with Bernie at the IFA on several occasions. And even though I knew Bernie and, we'd say hello at different events, never really had the time to spend with him. We probably spent, 3 or 4 hours together. And you could just see the passion coming through as he talks. You're never going to get him to retire completely. I don't care what you and Nate do. It's in his blood. And you could just tell that the culture is there. And I think you and Nate are doing a great job of extending that culture into your client base. So I got to change tracks here for a second. What's it like to work in and around and at one time for Bernie Siegel? I mean, what is it like?
Well, he got a lot of wisdom packed into his short stature. First thing you'll do is you'll laugh a lot working with Bernie because he's hilarious. But he has some core values that we've embraced and we continue to. And one of those is you may not make money every day, but you might make a friend. So always talk to people, always give them the time of day. And, paying it forward. I mean, that's really what we try to do. Bernie coined the phrase for the company, helping to create the American dream day after day. And it sounds kind of corny, and he's a corny guy, but that's what we do. We put people in business. We give them the ability to be in business for themselves, and it's something that we're very proud of. So Bernie did a great job getting us to a point. He also recognized that, he was at the point where he wasn't going to make it any bigger, and he needed help. And,
right.
He didn't have that thing that we know so much in franchising called founder syndrome, where the founder just doesn't let the company go to its fullest potential. And we've been able to work together through some very, very tough times in 08 and 09 and 10. You think about, what happened to your company, you can imagine what happened to ours. And we got through it, and thank goodness we're on a good path right now.
Well, helping to create the American dream day after day. I don't really think it's corny. I understand that, and that's why we titled today's show "Helping to Create the American Dream Day After Day," because it is just a tremendous statement, and you guys are definitely living it. A couple of other things as we begin to wrap down the show, and I had asked you for a couple of questions earlier in the week, and we were talking about different things. And I think this is a great question for the listeners because I think a lot of them do not understand this. How important are the franchise registry and bank credit reports?
Let's talk about them individually. The franchise registry is a clearinghouse for franchise brands to have their contracts and business model pre-cleared by the SBA for eligibility so that a lender doesn't need to worry, an SBA lender doesn't need to worry that their guarantee might be impaired by making a loan to that brand. It saves the bank legal fees. It gives the lender confidence that their guarantee is safe. Because if you think about SBA lending, they're lending based on the cash flow, but they're also a part of their decision is that they're getting their risk mitigated by Uncle Sam with that guarantee. So the registry is something, if you're in the space where your investment belongs in the SBA world, which is under $5 million, which is just about every franchise brand, right. The registry to me is necessary. On the bank credit reports, my phrase that everybody's coining now or copying now is your FDD is not your friend with banks, and it's not. Your FDD is a document that's written to conform to Federal Trade Commission guidelines that is approved by your attorney, that says as little as possible based on your attorney's comments and as much as possible based on your franchise development person's comments, and then there's a compromise. But banks need to make underwriting decisions without being having the time or the need to call other franchisees for P&L information for those things. The bank credit report translates your 400 average page document, which is the average size of an FDD. Now, I've seen them as high as 900, by the way, and distills it into banker-ese that they can understand. And that is something that is a tool that you need to be able to help your franchisees get access to credit, and especially first-time franchisees. When somebody who owns 4 units is going to a bank, the bank has the ability to look at their 4-unit performance and decide whether to lend the money on the 5th unit. Sure. If you're in the stage of development where you are looking for money for people that are coming into your brand for the first time, or you're going into new markets, to me, the bank credit report is the most valuable tool out there.
That's excellent advice. Obviously, through the past few years, the SBA has taken a lot of heat. But under the leadership of Karen Mills, the SBA stepped in to fill the gap as much as they could. Obviously, as a lifeline for the small business community, in giving credit where credit's due. That was to the tune of $60 billion over the past 2 years combined, and $101 billion in new lending to more than 218,000 small businesses since the recession began. And as we know, Karen has parted ways with the SBA. What are your thoughts or a vision with the SBA moving forward?
Well, Karen hasn't departed yet. She's staying until her replacement comes.
Okay, right.
So that's a good thing, and whoever comes in has very large shoes to fill. She's done an amazing job. She brought a business savvy to a political position, which I think is something that could be taught to everyone else in Washington, but I'm not going to get started. And she really navigated some very, very rough waters with a lot of help from the IFA. There's been a great open and honest and transparent communication between the IFA and the SBA, and where it's going. Sequestration is a little scary. They're going to start getting hit with although not as hard. They've prepared very well for it thanks to Karen Mills' leadership. But sequestration is not a good thing for small business in general. We'll see where that goes. It's kind of one of those more uncertainty in the uncertain world that we live in. I actually personally put something on Facebook and said that for every day that these folks can't come up with a compromise, they should lose a month's pay. It'd be interesting to see how long we wouldn't have a compromise if the congressmen weren't getting paid while they were trying to negotiate this. Yeah, absolutely. But I think the SBA is on the right track. I think there's a progressive look at trying to make capital access better. We're working on some veteran initiatives right now that hopefully will get some ears on Capitol Hill that will actually make it easier for veterans to get involved in franchising. Beyond just the Vet Fran program, we're looking for some help from Capitol Hill there. Probably, and it won't cost taxpayers any money. So it might make too much sense if it doesn't cost the taxpayers any money to do.
Yeah, there you go.
But I think that the SBA is something that we can be proud of, in the last 4 or 5 years under her leadership.
It's definitely huge shoes to fill. And is there? Are you aware of anybody whose name is in the hat at this point?
I am not. It is now a cabinet level position, so you report directly to the president. So it's certainly a big position. I am not aware of anybody's names in the hat.
And there is a new SBA loan pilot program, is there not?
Yes, it's called the SLA, Small Loan Advantage Program. There's a lot of information on the SBA's website about it. It's a real positive for franchising, and it really targets loans under $350,000, where it allows banks to use a kinder, friendlier process to originate those loans, but still retain a 75% guarantee on that loan. And that's probably the easiest and fastest way to explain it. If people want to get more information, they can either shoot me an email or call, or just go on the SBA website and look up SLA, Small Loan Advantage. It is a pilot program. I'm hoping it's made a permanent program. I think it's very important, especially in the franchise space.
I have a question from one of the listeners and wanted to know your thoughts on the proposal to increase the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour, and how you believe that's going to affect franchising.
Well, it can't be a good thing. I mean, there's a lot of people in franchising that work. If you look at somebody like Doc Cohen, who has cookie stores and malls in Houston, all over Houston, and he's hiring high school kids. Well, I don't disagree that 10.10 is better for somebody that's supporting a family than $7.25, but to have that burden be shared equally amongst everyone doesn't make any sense to me. There should be, if you're going to do that, there should be some other qualifiers in there.
Right. Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned Doc's name. As much as I see Doc at franchise events and always seem to see him on the flights back and forth to franchise events, we just realized that we literally live a couple of city blocks away from each other.
Really?
Very, very small world.
You need to go to his house and drink his wine.
Well, I look forward to the invite, and I understand a lot of you guys are down in the area, and I definitely look forward to seeing you here in the area. Steve Greenbaum was telling me that when I told him where my house is, yes, I know exactly where it is. I run by there all the time whenever I'm at Doc's house, which is usually 4 or 5 times a year. So I couldn't imagine sitting outside having a cup of coffee and looking and seeing Steve Greenbaum running down the street. I mean, I would have freaked out. Probably not as much as Steve would have freaked out if I was running by his house, because I definitely
That's
don't
right.
run.
You or me, for that matter.
Well, Ron, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be our guest again on Franchise Today. This is a wealth of information. I hope we've educated as many people as we probably confused. But again, Franchise Today is here to help talk about best practices, provide great information, and individuals like yourself in the franchise community giving of their time to spend on Franchise Today is certainly an honor, and I'm very flattered, and I'm happy to call you a friend and a colleague as well.
Absolutely, Paul, and thank you for everything that you do. This obviously is a big initiative, and it takes a lot of your time, and it's very much appreciated by us in the franchise community. So thank you for all that you do for franchising.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And today's segment of Franchise Today, as all of them are available online at blogtalkradio.com/Franchise Today Show. Will probably be up within minutes after we end the show here in just 1 minute. Next week, my guest is Sandy Shoemaker. We're going to continue the Franchise Finance series. We're going to get down to the nitty-gritty, getting your house in order. We'll be talking about unit economics, FDDs, and financial performance representations. I think that's really going to be an action-packed show as well. And then in May, April and May, please don't forget the Franchise Legal Series, our 4th annual, and I'm really pleased where this has grown and Franchise Today has grown. And I really do enjoy it. It is the labor of love, but it's great information, and I'm glad to be here every week. So until next week, my name is Paul Segreto, wishing you the best, the very best in this great, great thing we call franchising. Franchise Today is out.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. At American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.